A veteran's forgotten sacrifice. A small-town hero's quiet kindness. Betrayal by those he trusted. Stay to uncover a story that'll grip your heart. Like subscribe, hit the bell, stories that give you chills. It was a crisp autumn morning in Willow Creek, a small town where the diner's coffee never cooled and the church bell rang every Sunday at 8 sharp. Tom, a 65-year-old widower with grey hair and hands calloused from decades as a mechanic, shuffled down Maple Street. His faded denim jacket hung loose on his lean frame, the cuffs frayed from years of wrench turning. The air smelled of fallen leaves and motor oil, a familiar comfort in a life that hadn't been kind. Tom's eyes, tired but kind, carried the weight of loss. His wife, Mary, gone 5 years now, and a son who hadn't called in a decade. Yet he greeted every neighbour with a nod, his quiet good morning a ritual that kept the town's pulse steady. He'd fix a kid's bike or a widow's leaky faucet without asking for a dime. "Folks need help," he'd say, brushing off thanks. But deep down, Tom wrestled with a dream deferred. A garage of his own. A place to build something lasting, not just patch up what was broken. The bank had denied his loan again last week. The clerk's cold, "You're too old for this risk," still stinging. Still, he walked on, toolbox clinking, a spark of hope flickering in his chest. Willow Creek wasn't much. Just a few streets, a hardware store, and a VFW hall where old-timers swapped stories over cheap beer. Tom knew every crack in the sidewalk, every creak in the diner's screen door. He'd lived here all his life, raised a family, buried a wife, and somehow kept going. His routine was simple. Coffee at dawn, odd jobs by day, and evenings alone with a radio playing old country tunes. But today, something felt different. The air was sharper, the sky a deeper grey, like the world was holding its breath. As Tom turned onto the alley behind the diner, his boots crunching on gravel, he saw him. An old man, maybe 80, hunched on a crate, his tattered green army coat patched at the elbows. His white hair was thin, his face etched with lines like a road map of pain. A small duffel bag sat at his feet, and his trembling hands clutched a tarnished dog tag, the metal glinting faintly in the morning light. He didn't look up, didn't speak, just stared at the ground, lost in a world Tom couldn't see. "Hey, you all right?" Tom called softly, setting his toolbox down. The old man flinched, eyes darting up, piercing blue, haunted but sharp. "Fine," he muttered, voice rough like gravel. Tom noticed the man's shoes, soles worn through, and the way his breath hitched, like every word cost him. Without thinking, Tom pulled a thermos from his bag, poured steaming coffee into the lid, and held it out. "It's cold out. Take this." The old man hesitated, then took the cup, his fingers brushing Tom's. They were ice cold, trembling. "Thanks," he whispered, almost too quiet to hear. Tom nodded, not pushing, just standing there, letting the moment breathe. The alley smelled of rain-soaked water. The old man sipped the coffee, his hand steadying slightly, and Tom saw something in his eyes. A flicker of gratitude, maybe, or something deeper, buried under years of silence. Tom didn't ask questions. He'd learned long ago that some stories come when they're ready, not when you pry. Instead, he sat on a nearby crate, the wood rough under his palms, and took a sip from his own cup. The diner's bacon grease wafted from the vent, mixing with the damp earthiness of the alley. "You from around here?" Tom asked, keeping his tone light. The old man shook his head, just barely. "Passing through." His voice was clipped, but not unkind. Tom nodded, letting the silence settle. He noticed the dog tag again, the way the old man's thumb traced its edges, like it was all he had left. The quiet stretched, but it wasn't awkward. It was the kind of quiet that felt earned, like two people who understood the weight of time. Tom glanced at the duffel bag, its canvas faded, a small American flag patch sewn on the side. "Veteran?" Tom asked, gentle, no pressure. The old man's jaw tightened, but he nodded. "Vietnam, long time ago." Tom's heart sank a little. He'd known men like this, vets who carried wars in their bones, men the world forgot once the parades ended. His own brother had served, came back broken, and died too young. Tom pushed the memory down, focusing on the man in front of him. "Got a place to stay?" he asked. The old man shrugged, eyes dropping to the coffee. "I'll manage." Tom didn't push. He knew pride when he saw it, the kind that wouldn't beg, no matter how bad things got. "Hardware store's got blankets on sale," Tom said, casual. "Might have an extra if you're around later." The old man looked up, his gaze searching Tom's face, like he was waiting for the catch. There wasn't one. Tom stood, brushing gravel off his jeans. Got a fence to fix down the street. Swing by the diner if you need another coffee. He picked up his toolbox, the metal handle cold, and gave a small nod. The old man didn't say anything, but his eyes followed Tom as he walked away, the weight of that stare lingering. Tom didn't look back. He didn't need to. He'd done what felt right, same as always. The alley faded behind him, but the old man's face, those haunted blue eyes, stuck in his mind, like a song he couldn't shake. At the diner, Betty, the 70-year-old waitress with a smoker's rasp and a heart of gold, was wiping down the counter. "Morning, Tom," she called, her voice warm as the coffee pots behind her. "Fixing the world again?" He grinned, setting his toolbox by the door. "Just a fence, Betty. World's a taller order." She laughed, but her eyes flicked to the alley, where the old man still sat. "Saw you out there. Who's the fella?" Tom shrugged, pouring himself a fresh cup. "Vet. Passing through? Needed a coffee." Betty's face softened, her red lipstick cracking at the edges. "You're too good for this town, Tom." He waved her off, but her words hit deeper than he'd admit. Too good? Maybe. But Willow Creek was his home, and home meant looking out for folks, even strangers. By noon, word had spread. Small towns were like that. Nothing stayed quiet long. At the hardware store, old man Jenkins, 82, and still sharp as a tack, leaned on his cane. "Heard you're playing Good Samaritan again," he said, half teasing, half proud. Tom grabbed a can of paint from the shelf, the tin smooth and cool. "Just a cup of coffee, Jenkins. Don't make it a parade." But Jenkins wasn't alone. A few regulars, farmers, retirees, the postman, lingered nearby, their glances a mix of approval and curiosity. "Careful, Tom," said Pete, the postman, adjusting his cap. "Folks like that can be trouble. Drifters, you know." Tom's jaw tightened, but he kept his tone even. "He's a vet, Pete. Deserves better than a cold alley." Pete shrugged, unconvinced, and the others stayed quiet, their silence louder than words. Tom paid for the paint and left, the bell above the door jingling. He felt their eyes on his back, a mix of respect and doubt, like he was either a saint or a fool. Maybe both. Back at the alley, the old man was gone. The crate sat empty, the coffee cup balanced on its edge, drained dry. Tom stood there a moment, the gravel crunching under his boots, a strange ache in his chest. He didn't know why it mattered so much, but it did. Something about the old man, his silence, his dog tag, his pride, felt like a mirror, reflecting a part of Tom he hadn't faced in years. He picked up the cup, the plastic still warm, and tucked it into his bag. The alley smelled of rain now, the clouds heavier overhead. Tom slung his toolbox over his shoulder and headed to his next job. But the old man's absence followed him, quiet as a shadow. The next morning, Tom woke to the familiar creak of his porch swing, the air thick with the scent of pine and last night's rain. His small house, with its chipped white paint and sagging gutters, felt emptier than usual. He pulled on his faded denim jacket, the fabric soft from years of wear, and grabbed his thermos, the metal dented but warm in his hands. Willow Creek was stirring. Pickup trucks rumbled down Main Street, and the diner's neon sign buzzed faintly. Tom's routine hadn't changed in years, but today his thoughts kept drifting to the old man in the alley. Those haunted blue eyes, the dog tag, the way he'd clutched that coffee like it was a lifeline. Tom shook his head, trying to focus, but the memory clung like damp leaves to his boots. At the diner, Betty was already pouring his coffee, her apron stained with grease. "Back for more heroics, Tom?" she teased, but her eyes were soft, searching. He shrugged, sliding onto a stool. "Just here for the coffee, Betty." She leaned closer, voice low. "Saw that old fella again, by the VFW hall, just sitting there. Looked like he hadn't eaten in days." Tom's grip tightened on his mug, the ceramic warm against his calloused fingers. "Where is he now?" Betty nodded toward the window. "Still there, I reckon. Nobody's bothered him." Tom paid for his coffee and grabbed an extra cup, plus a bag of day-old muffins from the counter. The paper bag crinkled as he stepped outside, the morning air sharp with the bite of fall. The VFW hall, a squat brick building with faded flags out front, was a 5-minute walk. Tom found the old man on a bench, his tattered green army coat pulled tight against the chill. The duffel bag sat at his feet, that same flag patch catching the light. His hands, still trembling, held the dog tag, thumb tracing its edges like a prayer. Tom approached slowly, boots scuffing the pavement. "Morning," he said, holding out the coffee and muffins. "Thought you might be hungry." The old man looked up, his blue eyes wary but softer than yesterday. "Don't need charity," he said, voice gruff. Tom set the bag on the bench, not pushing. "Ain't charity. Just breakfast." The old man stared at the bag, then at Tom, like he was weighing something heavier than muffins. Finally, he took the coffee, his fingers brushing the cup's warmth. "Obliged," he muttered, tearing into a muffin with surprising speed. Tom sat on the other end of the bench. The wood splintered under his weight. The air smelled of wet grass and distant chimney smoke. He didn't ask questions, just sipped his coffee, letting the old man eat in peace. After a while, the man spoke, voice low. "Name's Frank." Tom nodded. "Tom?" Frank's eyes flicked to the dog tag, then away. "Served in Nam, 68 to 70. Lost a lot of good men." His voice cracked, just for a second, and Tom felt it. A shared ache, the kind only loss carves out. "My brother was in Nam," Tom said quietly. "Didn't come back the same. Died in 82. Frank's jaw tightened, but he nodded, a silent understanding passing between them. They sat there, the town waking around them, the bench creaking under their weight. Tom noticed Frank's shoes again, the holes bigger in the daylight, and made a mental note to check the thrift store later. He didn't say it out loud. Frank wasn't the type to take handouts easily, and Tom respected that. As Tom stood to leave, Frank looked up. "Why you doing this? You don't know me." Tom shrugged, the thermos heavy in his hand. "Doesn't matter. You're here." "That's enough." Frank's eyes held his for a moment, something unspoken passing through them. Then he looked away, clutching the dog tag tighter. Tom walked off, the pavement cool under his boots, feeling like he'd just built something small but solid. Word travels fast in Willow Creek, and by noon, Tom's kindness wasn't a secret anymore. At the hardware store, Old Man Jenkins gave him a nod, his cane tapping the floor. "Good on you, Tom. That vet's been through hell. Needs folks like you." But not everyone saw it that way. Pete, the postman, leaned against the counter, his cap tilted back. "You're asking for trouble, Tom. Feeding strays like that?" "He'll be back, wanting more." Tom grabbed a roll of duct tape, the plastic smooth in his hands. "He's a vet, Pete, not a stray." Pete snorted, unconvinced. "Just saying, don't be surprised if he's got a rap sheet. Drifters always do." The word stung, but Tom kept his face neutral, paying for the tape. Outside, he overheard two women from the church group whispering by the diner. "Tom's got a big heart," one said, her scarf fluttering in the breeze. "But he's too trusting. That man could be dangerous." The other nodded, clutching her purse. He should stick to fixing things, not playing hero. Tom kept walking, the gravel crunching under his boots, but the words followed him. He'd always been the guy who helped. Flat tires, broken fences, jammed locks. But now, his small act of kindness was splitting the town, like a crack in the sidewalk nobody could ignore. Betty, at least, was on his side. When Tom stopped by the diner for a refill, she slid a slice of pie his way, gratis. "Don't listen to the gossips," she said, her voice firm. "You're doing right by that man." "God knows he needs it." Tom managed a smile, the pie's cinnamon warmth cutting through the day's chill. "Thanks, Betty." But even her support couldn't shake the growing unease in his gut. He wasn't trying to be a hero, just a decent human. Why did that feel like a fight? That afternoon, Tom's kindness was put to the test. He was fixing a gate at the community centre when Carl, the town's self-appointed overseer, strode up. Carl, 60, with a pressed flannel shirt and a permanent scowl, ran the centre like his personal kingdom. "Tom," he said, arms crossed, "heard you're feeding some vagrant." Tom kept working, the screwdriver cold in his hand. "His name's Frank. He's a vet." Carl's eyes narrowed. "Don't care who he is?" "He's loitering by the VFW, scaring folks." "You're encouraging him." Tom set the screwdriver down, wiping sweat from his brow. "He's not hurting anyone. Just needs a break." Carl stepped closer, voice low. "You keep this up, people talk. Donations to the centre could dry up. You want that on you?" Tom's chest tightened. The community centre was Willow Creek's heart. Youth programs, veteran meetups, holiday dinners. He'd fixed its roof last summer, no charge. The thought of it suffering because of him hit hard. "I'm not stopping," Tom said, voice steady. "He's got nowhere else." Carl's face hardened. "Your call, Tom. But don't cry when folks turn on you." He walked off, his boots loud on the gravel. Tom picked up the screwdriver, his hands shakier than he'd admit. He finished the gate, the wood rough under his palms, but Carl's words echoed. Was he wrong to help Frank? The town's judgment was one thing, but risking the centre, something he'd poured years into, felt like a punch he hadn't braced for. He thought of Mary, how she'd always said, Do what's right, Tom, even when it's hard. But hard was one thing. This felt like walking into a storm with no shelter in sight. By evening, the conflict was boiling over. Tom stopped by the thrift store, picking up a pair of sturdy boots for Frank, the leather scuffed but solid. When he dropped them off at the VFW bench, Frank was there, eating another muffin from the morning's bag. Thought these might help, Tom said, setting the boots down. Frank stared at them, then at Tom, his blue eyes unreadable. Don't owe you nothing, he said, but his voice was softer, almost grateful. Never said you did, Tom replied, managing a half smile. He left before Frank could argue, the dusk air cool against his face. But as he walked home, trouble found him. A group of locals, Pete, Carl, and a few others, stood outside the diner, their voices sharp. Tom, you gotta stop this, Pete called, stepping forward. That guy's trouble. Heard he was kicked out of a shelter in Dayton for fighting. Tom froze, the thrift store bag still in his hand. Where'd you hear that? Doesn't matter, Carl cut in. You're stirring things up. Folks don't want him here. Tom's jaw clenched. He's a veteran, served this country. You gonna turn your back on that? Carl scoffed. Don't pull the hero card, Tom. You're not saving the world. You're making a mess. The others nodded, their faces a mix of pity and frustration. Tom felt the weight of their stares, like a rope tightening around his chest. He'd known these people his whole life. Shared beers, fixed their cars, mourned their losses. Now they were looking at him like he was the problem. I'm not the one turning my back, Tom said, voice low but firm. He walked past them, the diner's neon sign buzzing in the silence. Betty watched from the window, her face tight with worry, but she didn't call out. Tom's boots hit the pavement, each step heavier than the last. He thought of Frank, alone on that bench, and Mary's voice in his head. Do what's right. But right was starting to feel like a lonely road, and Tom wasn't sure how much further he could walk it. The weight of Willow Creek's judgment clung to Tom like damp clothes after a storm. By the third morning, his routine felt heavier, each step down Maple Street a reminder of the eyes now watching him. His faded denim jacket, once a badge of honest work, seemed to mark him as an outsider in his own town. The air was sharp with frost, the scent of chimney smoke mixing with the faint tang of motor oil from his toolbox. Tom's hands, calloused and steady, gripped the thermos tighter than usual, his grey hair catching the pale sunrise. He hadn't slept well. Carl's words, Pete's accusations, the whispers at the diner. They'd burrowed deep, gnawing at the edges of his resolve. He wasn't a hero, never claimed to be. All he'd done was give a man coffee, muffins, a pair of boots. So why did it feel like he was fighting a war? At the diner, Betty's usual warmth was tempered with worry. She slid a coffee across the counter, her red lipstick cracked at the corners. Tom, you okay? She asked, voice low. He nodded, but his eyes, tired, shadowed, betrayed him. Just tired, Betty? She leaned closer, glancing at the door. Folks are talking, saying you're stirring up trouble with that vet. Carl's pushing for a town meeting. Tom's stomach twisted. A meeting? Over a cup of coffee and a pair of boots? He sipped the coffee, the heat doing little to thaw the chill in his chest. Thanks for the heads up, he said, managing a half smile. But as he stepped outside, the town felt different, colder, like the streets themselves were turning their back. He headed to the VFW hall, hoping to find Frank, to check if the boots fit, maybe share another quiet moment. The bench came into view, its splintered wood glinting with frost. But Frank was gone. The duffel bag, the tattered army coat, the dog tag, vanished. The boots Tom had left sat neatly on the bench, untouched, like a rejection carved in leather. Tom stood there, the gravel crunching under his boots, a hollow ache spreading through him. The air smelled of wet leaves, the silence louder than the church bell on Sunday. He picked up the boots, the leather cold and stiff, and turned them over in his hands. Had Frank left town? Gotten hurt? Or had he just decided Tom's help wasn't worth the trouble? The questions stung, each one a small betrayal. Not from Frank, but from the hope Tom had let himself feel. He tucked the boots under his arm and walked away, the thermos heavy in his hand. The town kept moving, trucks rumbled, kids laughed on their way to school, but Tom felt like he was standing still, caught in a moment he couldn't escape. He thought of Mary, her voice soft but firm. Do what's right, Tom. But what was right when the man you helped disappeared without a word? The ache followed Tom through the day, growing heavier as Willow Creek's judgment sharpened. By afternoon, the town meeting was no longer a rumor. Carl had posted flyers at the community centre, the diner, even the hardware store. Discussing public safety concerns, 7 p.m. Tom saw one taped to a lamppost, the paper curling in the wind. He didn't need to read it to know what it was about. At the hardware store, Old Man Jenkins was quieter than usual, his cane tapping softly. "You going to that meeting, Tom?" he asked, eyes avoiding Tom's. Tom grabbed a pack of nails, the metal clinking in his hand. "Got work to do," he said, voice flat. Jenkins nodded, but the silence between them felt like a wall. Outside, Pete and a few others were gathered, their voices low but sharp. "He's got no business playing saviour," Pete said, loud enough for Tom to hear. "That drifter's probably long gone, and good riddance." Tom kept walking, the nails heavy in his pocket, but the words cut deeper than he'd admit. By evening, the community centre was packed. Farmers, retirees, churchgoers, all buzzing with opinions. Tom didn't go, but Betty filled him in later, her voice tight over the phone. "Carl called you reckless, Tom. Said you're putting the town at risk, helping vagrants." Pete claimed Frank stole from a shelter in Dayton. No proof, just talk. Tom sat on his porch, the swing creaking under him, the phone cold against his ear. "And the others?" he asked. Betty sighed. "Some defended you. Jenkins, me, a few others. But most just nodded along. They're scared, Tom. Scared of change, of strangers, of you." He hung up, the night air thick with the scent of pine. Scared of him. He'd fixed their fences, their cars, their lives for decades. Now, one act of kindness had turned him into a threat. The betrayal wasn't just from Carl or Pete. It was from the town itself, the place he'd called home his whole life. He thought of Frank's empty bench, the boots in his hands, and felt a crack in his heart, like a windshield hit by a stone. He wasn't sure it could hold much longer. The next day, Tom hit his breaking point. He was patching a roof for Widow Thompson when Carl showed up, his flannel shirt pressed as always, his scowl deeper. "Tom, we need to talk," he said, arms crossed. Tom kept hammering, the nails biting into the shingles. "Say your piece, Carl." Carl's voice was low, sharp. "You're tearing this town apart. Folks are saying you're soft on criminals, that you'd rather help a thief than protect us." Tom's hammer stopped mid-swing, his knuckles white. "Frank's no thief. He's a vet. Served more than you ever will." Carl stepped closer, voice dropping to a hiss. "You don't get it, do you? The centre's losing donations. People don't trust us with you acting like some bleeding heart. Stop this, or you're done here." Tom's chest burned, his breath catching. The community centre, his second home, where he'd taught kids to fix bikes, where he'd mourned Mary with half the town, was slipping away. He thought of Frank, gone without a trace, and the boots still sitting on his porch. Had it all been for nothing? He set the hammer down, the wood handle slick with sweat, and looked Carl in the eye. "You want me gone, say it plain." Carl's face twitched, but he didn't back down. "Keep this up, and you won't have a choice." He walked off, leaving Tom alone on the roof, the wind cold against his face. Tom's hands trembled, not from the chill, but from a rage he hadn't felt in years. He wanted to scream, to tear the shingles off with his bare hands, but instead he sat there, the town stretching out below him. Willow Creek looked the same, red brick diner, sagging VFW hall. But it wasn't his anymore. He thought of Mary, her smile, her faith in him. "Do what's right," she'd said. But right now, right felt like a losing battle. And Tom was tired, so damn tired of fighting alone. That night, Tom sat in his living room, the radio off, the silence thick. His toolbox sat in the corner, the metal scratched and dented, a map of every job he'd done. On the coffee table lay a small wooden box, its varnish worn smooth. He hadn't opened it in years, but tonight he needed it. Inside was a photo of Mary, her smile bright against the faded Polaroid edges, and a letter from his brother, written from Vietnam in '69. "Tom," it read, "keep the home fires burning. Look out for the ones who need it most." Tom's throat tightened, his fingers tracing the ink. His brother had died a decade later, broken by a war that never let him go. Tom had promised to honour him, to live by those words. He thought of Frank, his dog tag, his pride, his disappearance. Had Tom failed him too? He closed the box, the wood cool under his palms, and leaned back, the couch creaking. The betrayal stung. Carl's threats, Pete's lies, the town's silence. But the worst was the doubt creeping in. Had he been wrong to help? Was kindness just a fool's errand in a world that didn't care? He stared at the ceiling, the plastic cracked like his resolve, and felt the weight of 65 years pressing down. But somewhere, Deep in his chest, a spark flickered. Mary's voice, his brother's words, Frank's blue eyes. He wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. He stood, the floorboards groaning, and grabbed his jacket. Tomorrow, he'd face the town, the doubts, the emptiness where Frank had been. He didn't know how, but he'd keep going. Because that's what you did when the world turned its back. You kept showing up, even when it hurt. Morning broke over Willow Creek, the sky a bruised purple, heavy with the promise of rain. Tom stepped onto his porch, his faded denim jacket zipped against the chill, the pair of boots he'd bought for Frank tucked under his arm. The town felt quieter, the air thick with the scent of wet pine and distant wood smoke. His grey hair caught the faint dawn light, his eyes, tired but resolute, scanning the street. Last night's doubts still lingered, but the wooden box, Mary's photo, and his brother's letter had steadied him. He'd face whatever came today, even if it meant standing alone. At the diner, Betty was wiping down the counter, her apron crinkled, her face tight with something new. Anticipation, maybe. "Tom," she said, voice low, "you need to get to the community center. Now." He frowned, setting his thermos down, the metal warm in his hand. "What's going on?" She shook her head, a small smile breaking through. "Just go. Trust me." Tom grabbed the boots and headed out, the gravel crunching under his boots, a knot forming in his gut. The community centre loomed ahead, its brick walls weathered but sturdy. The parking lot fuller than he'd expected for a Thursday morning. Pickup trucks, sedans, even a news van from the county station. Something was happening. Inside, the air buzzed with voices, the scent of coffee and old wood filling the room. Tom stopped short. The hall was packed. Jenkins, Pete, Widow Thompson, dozens of familiar faces, their eyes turning to him. At the front stood Carl, his flannel shirt pressed, but his scowl gone, replaced by something uneasy. And beside him, a stranger, a man in his 50s, broad-shouldered, in a crisp navy suit, his dark hair streaked with grey. But what stopped Tom's heart was the figure next to him. Frank. The old vet stood tall, his tattered green army coat gone, replaced by a clean flannel shirt and jeans, his white hair combed back. His blue eyes, still haunted, locked onto Tom's, and he nodded, slow and deliberate. Tom's grip tightened on the boots, his breath catching. What the hell was going on? The man in the suit stepped forward, clearing his throat. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm David Harper, Veterans Affairs Liaison for the state. I'm here because of a man named Frank Sullivan." Tom's eyes flicked to Frank, who stood straighter now, his hands still but clutching that tarnished dog tag. David continued, his voice steady but warm. Frank served in Vietnam, 68 to 70. He saved 3 men during a firefight in Da Nang, dragging them from a burning outpost under enemy fire. Earned a Bronze Star but never claimed it. He's been off the grid for years, struggling, forgotten by the system he served. The room fell silent, even Carl shifting uncomfortably. David's gaze landed on Tom. Until this man, Tom, gave him a cup of coffee, a meal, a pair of boots. That small act of kindness led Frank to reach out to a VA contact he hadn't spoken to in decades. "He's here today because of you, Tom." Tom's throat tightened, the boots heavy in his hands. He looked at Frank, who gave a small, almost imperceptible nod, his eyes glistening. David held up an envelope, its government seal glinting under the fluorescent lights. Frank's getting his benefits reinstated, a place to stay, and the recognition he deserves. But more than that, he's reminded us what humanity looks like. The crowd murmured, some nodding, others looking down, shame creeping into their faces. Tom stood frozen, the weight of the moment sinking in. Frank hadn't left because he didn't care. He'd left to reclaim his life, sparked by a stranger's kindness. The room erupted in applause, slow at first, then thunderous, filling the hall like a summer storm. Tom felt his cheeks flush, the boots slipping from his hands to the floor with a soft thud. Frank stepped forward, his step steady, and extended a hand. "Thought I didn't need nobody," he said, voice rough but clear. "You proved me wrong, Tom." Tom shook his hand, the vet's grip strong despite the years. And for a moment, the world was just the two of them. 2 men who'd seen loss, who'd carried it, but who'd found something worth holding on to. David raised a hand, quieting the crowd. "There's more," he said, pulling a small box from his pocket. He opened it, revealing a polished bronze star, its ribbon vibrant against the velvet. "Frank, this belongs to you." He pinned it to Frank's shirt, the room silent except for the faint click of metal. Frank's jaw trembled. his fingers brushing the metal, and Tom saw those blue eyes glisten again. Not with pain, but with something softer. Pride, maybe. Or peace. Then came the reckoning. David turned to Carl, his voice firm. I understand there's been resistance to Tom's actions. Accusations, even lies about Frank's character. That stops now. Carl's face reddened, his hands fidgeting. We were just looking out for the town, he stammered. David's eyes narrowed. Looking out for the town means honouring men like Frank, not casting them out. And it means thanking men like Tom, not threatening them. The crowd shifted, whispers rippling through. Pete, standing near the back, slipped out the door, his cap pulled low. Others, Widow Thompson, Jenkins, clapped louder, their faces bright with something Tom hadn't seen in days. Respect. Betty pushed through the crowd, her smoker's rasp cutting through. Damn right, she shouted, pulling Tom into a hug. You showed him, Tom. The applause swelled again, and Tom felt the crack in his heart start to mend, like a fence he'd fixed 100 times. He looked at Frank, at the bronze star, at the faces around him, and realized he hadn't been alone. Not really. He'd just needed to hold on a little longer. The days that followed were different in Willow Creek. Tom's act of kindness, once a spark, became a flame. The community centre, far from losing donations, saw an influx. Veterans groups, local businesses, even the county paper pitching in after David's visit made headlines. Carl stepped back, his influence fading, his scowl softer now, tinged with regret. At a town hall meeting, Widow Thompson stood up, her voice steady. We almost lost sight of who we are, she said. Tom reminded us. Let's not forget again. The town agreed to a new initiative. A weekly breakfast at the VFW Hall, open to veterans and anyone down on their luck. Tom helped set it up, hammering benches, fixing the hall's leaky roof, his toolbox clinking like always. Betty volunteered to cook, her pancakes drawing crowds, her laughter filling the air. Jenkins too pitched in, sharing stories of his own Navy days, his cane tapping proudly. Even Pete showed up, quieter now, pouring coffee instead of complaints. The change wasn't loud, but it was real. Neighbours greeting each other a little warmer, eyes meeting instead of turning away. Tom saw it in the kids who started leaving canned goods at the VFW, in the church group knitting blankets for the homeless. Willow Creek was still a small town, with its creaky diner and sagging fences, but it felt bigger now, like it had room for everyone. Frank too was part of it. He moved into a small apartment through the VA, just a block from the diner. Tom saw him at the first breakfast, sitting with other vets, his bronze star pinned to a new jacket. He wasn't talkative, but his smile, small, hard-earned, said enough. Tom didn't need thanks. Seeing Frank there, alive and seen, was more than enough. The legacy of Tom's kindness stretched beyond Willow Creek. The county paper ran a story, Small-Town Mechanic Honours Forgotten Vet, and it spread, picked up by state news, then a national blog. Letters poured in, some from veterans, others from strangers, all thanking Tom for reminding them what mattered. One, from a young soldier in Virginia, read, I was losing hope. Your story gave it back. Tom kept the letters in Mary's wooden box, next to her photo and his brother's note, a quiet testament to a life well lived. He didn't start the breakfasts or fix the VFW hall for recognition. He did it because it was right, because men like Frank deserved better than cold alleys and forgotten wars. But the recognition came anyway, not in medals or speeches, but in the way people looked at him now. Neighbours nodding, kids waving, Betty slipping him extra pie. Tom found peace in it, a quiet purpose that filled the empty spaces Mary's death had left. He still dreamed of his garage, but now it felt closer, like a blueprint he could build if he kept going. Frank too found something new. He started volunteering at the VFW, helping younger vets navigate the VA, his dog tag always around his neck, a reminder of who he'd been and who he was now. One evening, he pulled Tom aside, his voice low. Never thought I'd owe my life to a cup of coffee, he said, a half smile breaking through. Tom shrugged, the dusk air cool against his face. Wasn't the coffee. It was you, Frank. You kept fighting. Frank nodded, his eyes glistening. And they stood there, the VFW's flag snapping in the breeze, two men who'd carried loss but found a way to carry each other. Tom walked home that night, his boots scuffing the pavement, the stars sharp above Willow Creek. The town was quiet, the diner's neon sign flickering, the VFW hall glowing faintly in the distance. He passed the alley where he'd first met Frank, the crate still there, weathered but sturdy. Tom paused, his hand brushing the rough wood, and thought of Mary, his brother, the letter that had kept him going. Kindness wasn't loud, wasn't flashy. It was coffee, boots, a hand extended when no one else would. It was the courage to stand up, even when the world pushed back. And in that small act, Tom had changed everything. Not just for Frank, but for a town, for strangers he'd never meet, for himself. He smiled, the ache in his chest softer now, and kept walking, the gravel crunching under his boots. The future a little brighter than before. Have you ever seen someone stand up for what's right, even when it cost them? Drop your story in the comments, hit that like button, and subscribe. Stories like these, full of heart and grit, are why we're here.